There is a national emergency. Net zero is about to crash the economy. The breaking news today is that a leaked sensitive government document showed the following. Net zero risks wiping 10% of GDP by 2030. It could cause a global financial crash. It might increase government debt and cause inflation to spiral, and the poorest people will be hit the hardest. The game's up. It's over. It's finished for net zero. And you'd think it's finished for this guy.
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Surely Ed Miliband has to go, now the truth is out. I mean, the head of GB Energy recently released a video praising Aberdeen.
We are proudly based in Aberdeen, a world-class centre of energy expertise. Our goal is to help communities and bill payers reap the benefits of clean, secure, homegrown energy.
Do you know where he was there when he recorded that video? London. Westminster. I mean, the whole thing just feels like a complete con, doesn't it? Britain can be a world leader in floating wind farms. Great. So if Britain's GDP collapses by 10%, there's a global financial crash, mass unemployment, you can take comfort in the fact that that plonker from GB Energy has turned the Irish Sea into a floating wind farm. It's the poorest people who will be hit the hardest, having to change cars, etc., etc. And that's the point, isn't it? Net zero is a luxury belief for posh people with nothing better to do. The reality of economic Armageddon as a result of net zero does not seem to bother the net zero fanatics like Ed Miliband. That bloke is absolutely wadded. The celebrities who support net zero are millionaires. Emma Thompson popped over to London to take part in an Extinction Rebellion protest, then flew back to New York in business class. Still, that makes a change from when she's on a gas-guzzling super yacht, doesn't it? I'm convinced that loads of the Just Stop Oil Brigade are the sons and daughters of multimillionaires. Remember this guy? There he is. Now, I don't know for sure, but I imagine you don't get a name like Edred without coming from good stock, do you? I'll just say it again. Net zero is just a luxury belief for posh people who do not have your problems. Do they care about 2,500 workers being made unemployed because steelworks are closing, or the thousands of people who work on the oil rigs? Today's leaked document, the rush to net zero, risks causing a global financial crash and may knock 10% off our GDP. Anyone sane would stop it now.
Great British Energy is going to be an energy company that will drive our work on renewables.
Speed ahead with Great British Energy, a new energy company that will harness clean British power for good British jobs.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. We are being led by this guy. Prime Minister Keir Starmer feels so strongly about net zero, he agreed to pay £11.6 billion for climate foreign aid at COP29, where he was one of the only world leaders to attend alongside the Taliban. Lovely stuff. The economic doom of net zero has today been exposed. There is no economic case for net zero. It's finished. But mark my words, you're going to hear a lot more about this, because this is all they've got left, all right? Do your bit for the climate change, right? Pay your bills, because actually climate change is racist, OK? And if you don't bankrupt yourself, then you're a racist too. Let's get thoughts of my panel. We have, of course, got GBNews superstar Miriam Kate, Tory peer Lord Bailey, and ex-Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Miriam, so look, I mean, 10% of GDP, global financial crisis, thousands of job loss, if not millions of jobs lost. We're all going to be fighting each other for scraps of foods outside a burning Lidl if we press ahead for net zero. I mean, anyone with a brain in their head would stop this, wouldn't they?
Yes, I think we know much of this already. Just the fact that we've had catastrophic increases in energy prices, largely as a result of renewable subsidies and the fact that they're not reliable, the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time, it has led to the deindustrialisation of our country, for example. And we've seen this in real time in Germany, how they've switched off Russian gas, they've closed down their own nuclear power stations, and now guess what? Their manufacturing sector's died. Of course this is going to bankrupt our country. I think a lot of people knew this already, but it's very interesting that the actual evidence has been leaked now.
Well, so surely, Ed Miliband, his picture's on the screen behind me here, Surely he's got to go. This is his mission. These net zero targets within this time frame, that's the reason he exists in British politics. Now it's emerged that if we do that, then we're absolutely knackered. So surely he's got to go.
Look, I sat here more than a year ago and told you that Keir Starmer has built a coalition of disgruntled people, and people in the Green lobby were a big part of that. So he's had to give Ed Miliband this leeway. But this is the same government that's about to cut disability allowance. They have a choice to make. They either have these very nice to do, sound great at dinner parties, or they stand up the poorest people in the country. If they go on this crusade and don't fix the finances so that poor people can operate in this country, they will be gone. That's Keir Starmer's choice.
Matthew, 2 points. So, Ed Miliband, firstly, does he have to go? But secondly, as well, this report, the other aspect to it, a major aspect to it, is that it's the poorest people in British society who will have to suffer the most if we want to hit millionaire Ed Miliband's targets. How does Labour square that?
So, no, I don't think Ed has to go, and I think that sticking with net zero, but having a sensible transition is important. On this report is actually from under the Tories. It's actually from the back end of 2023. So there was another 9 months of Tory government to go, and it sets out the choices that you can make. And I think what's happened is since the Labour government's come in, it's making a different set of choices. GB Energy, nobody ever said GB Energy was going to cut your bills instantly. What it's about is it's about making sure that we have the energy infrastructure to cut bills over time. The 300 quid promise was by the end of Parliament.
But we don't. The problem with Ed Miliband and GB Energy is they're focusing the money in the wrong place. You can have all of the windmills you like, but if you can't transport that power across the country, you're done. So we've spent the last 10, 20 years building we have the first, second and third biggest wind farms on the planet, but we don't have the ability to move that power around.
But
the money has been spent in the wrong place, and Ed Miliband keeps talking about wind farms. We should be talking about power grid.
He also talks about the power grid a lot. I mean, because you're absolutely right, Sean. I mean, both frankly, as a country, we haven't renewed our power grid. The whole world is moving towards green technologies. We need to make sure that British jobs capture as many of those as possible, and that we have
the whole world is moving towards nuclear power.
Yeah, or not bothering with net zero. That's the other aspect to it. A lot of these people aren't. And, we are in a situation here now where we have gone all in on it under Ed Miliband, all in. And does that not mean that we're going to be worse off if... But the thing is, you've got to bring the public with you. During COVID, we were always told, where was the cost-benefit analysis for lockdowns?
Yeah, but the argument in COVID was that it was an immediate and dreadful catastrophe, and therefore there was justification for bankrupting ourselves. Now, many of us on this channel completely disagree with that, but nevertheless, that was the argument that was made. It's exactly the same with the Green lobby. They have convinced politicians, the media, the thinking classes that we have an immediate catastrophe. Now, climate change might be real. It is real, but it doesn't mean it's a catastrophe. It doesn't mean it's immediate, and it doesn't mean it's our most important challenge. But they've convinced people that it is, and therefore they've justified bankrupting ourselves. If it's not an immediate challenge, if it's not a catastrophic challenge, then we should be much more measured about our response to that. Maybe that does mean we invest in renewables, but at a slow rate that allows us to transition.
I tell you what would be immediate. An economic collapse of some type. Let's be very clear. If you are a struggling person in this country, for instance, someone who's about to have their benefit cut, starvation, or one of the waspy women, maybe, your starvation will kill you long before climate change. That's immediate. And I say Keir Starmer is going to have to face some real political hard truths, and this is one of them.
Matthew, we are being led here by millionaires, OK, who are happy to cut the benefits for some of the poorest people in society, happy for pensioners, unfortunately, to freeze to death in their own homes over the course of this winter. And it's the poorest people in society who are going to be hit worst and hit hardest by net zero. If it falls to GB News, Matthew, to stick up for some of the poorest people in society, some of the most marginalised groups, then so be it. But isn't that the Labour
Party's job?
First of all,
Labour isn't proposing to cut benefits for those with disabilities. What it's proposing to do is something I thought Sean and the Tories backed, which is to tighten the eligibility going forward, so that the benefits bill doesn't explode and doesn't get out of hand. In terms of government and millionaires, well, I mean, come off it, Patrick. This is the first ever cabinet in British history which doesn't have a single person from from the 7% minority of the most wealthy who went to private school. It's a cabinet of people who went to comprehensive,
but that's,
of ordinary people.
That's irrelevant.
Let me finish, Sean. And they understand that energy prices are a huge concern for families up and down the country, which is why I don't think that you can go net zero at the cost of anybody else.
Yeah, but I tell you what you're saying, Matthew, is it irrelevant?
This Labour cabinet could be an advert for private.
A cheap shot.
What you're saying, Matthew, is irrelevant because of the decisions they're making. You could be the richest person in the world if you make the correct decisions for the poorest people in your country. Hurrah! That is not happening. We're seeing Ed Miliband, who's been captured by a particular set of people, lobbyists, and he's ramming that through with the help of the
was a policy of the Tory government for 15 years.
Not this delivery.
In law by the Tories.
And there are two things. Let's be clear, right? Should we clean up our energy delivery? Yes. Should we produce our own power? Yes. But not at the expense of people's ability to live. But that's what the Labour government is about to do.
I think we're conflating two separate issues. Of course, there is an element that net zero will affect the poorest people the hardest in terms of having to change your car, having to buy a heat pump, of course. But any change in any cost, by definition, does affect people on low incomes more proportionally. But actually, these are two different issues. Is the government responsible for providing for the individual? That's the welfare state. Well, people 100 years ago would have said, no, it's the family. That's a separate argument. Is the government responsible for the long-term energy security of this country, as it is for military security, as it is for industrial security? Yes, they are separate arguments. It's not that the disability, the benefits argument isn't important, but they are not connected. We need to see them as very different issues.
I think they're connected through the finances of the country. We have one pot to spend. Keir Starmer and Miliband are spending too much of that pot in the wrong place. If you are a person whose benefits are about to go missing, you will see the connection and you will wonder to yourself, why are they spending money on what feels like a project for the chattering classes when we're all struggling?
Is that right? Is it just a project for the chattering classes? People like Emma Thompson, who can fly in business class because they want to go and attend an Extinction Rebellion march, and then she's back off on a super yacht, all of this stuff. You know, Edred from Just Stop Oil, our mate Edred. That's a nice, normal, traditional working class name, that, isn't it?
Well, can I say Edred and Emma Thompson have nothing to do with the Labour Party? Keir Starmer's condemned Just Stop Oil.
Was for a while.
No, it wasn't. Keir Starmer condemned Just Stop Oil in the strongest terms. One donor, who we won't mention, who gave money to Just Stop Oil, gave money to the Labour Party as well. Actually, he stopped giving money to Just Stop Oil, and he still gives money to the Labour Party because he knows that you change Britain through common sense policies. And you say I agree about bringing people with you and not forcing people. Remember that the Tories were going to force people to get rid of their gas boilers, and actually we stopped that. I can say to
but you're forcing people to get heat pumps.
That you have to bring people with you, and you have to have a sensible plan to get us there, which doesn't involve people shivering in their homes. I think at the moment the balance is about right.
Just for a final few seconds on this, Miriam, but realistically, how on earth can they sell this to the public at the moment? When figures come out like this, leaked documents came out late last night, now today we're all talking about it, about, a global financial crisis, 10% off GDP. We already know that GDP per capita, it went down about 1% last year. We are all getting poorer, both individually and basically as a country, pretty much. How on earth can you possibly expect people to buy in to this massive net zero?
You can't, and I do think it's dead. I mean, you've seen the Conservative Party obviously do a complete U-turn on this on Tuesday, which I completely support. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a strategic leak to pave the way for the Labour Party ditching it too. I don't think they'll do it wholesale straight away, but there'll be a reason. We have to spend more on defence. I think there's a big public support for that. And we have to spend more on housing and all those other things. And I think it will be quietly dropped. And the point will be made, what's the point anyway? We're only responsible for 1% of the world's global emissions. There are no borders in the atmosphere. China builds a new power station every 2 weeks. Let's clean up the environment, yes, but let's not break our economy overdoing it.
We can't do it alone.
No, and actually we'll be left out to dry, won't we? We'll have a sea full of wind farms.
The French will be laughing.
We are part of that international agreement.
Yeah, but we will be producing the loveliest, cleanest air in the world, and the dirty air will be blowing in from the rest of the world. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. We need to do it together, not on our own.
You can't live off fresh air, sadly.
Well, there we go. Sadly not. Anyway, well, look, watch this space. But, hey, it's the kind of thing that many people have been saying for a little while. This headlong pursuit of net zero, actually, shock horror, could make all of our lives a bit worse.